workshop to the color with Harvest. This Denver Community Media's Harvest Your Creativity workshop. This is our launching off season of workshops, and we're just going to give a few minutes for people to trickle in. While we wait, if you are interested in other workshops, we have a whole bunch going on this month. You can go to denvercommunitymedia.org/get-involved, get-involved, and that link is in the chat for those of you online. And we're also running a whole bunch of special offers this month. We have 25% off all DCM certification courses using the code DCM October 25A. We have Refer a Friend, get a free 2-hour studio rental, take a, Refer a Friend, get a there we go. That's all that is on that one. Take a class and leave a Google review, get 25% off your membership, donate $8 or more and enter to win a free all access membership, annual membership, which will be announced on November 7th at our Halloween Spooktacular event. That's going to be a fun event. Down here at the Buell Public Media Center, we're going to have a whole bunch of local films and some spooky films, and food and drinks and good networking. So if you're around, come on down. That'll be 5 to 9 on November 7th. Yes, 5 to 9. Yeah, so also have all these discounts in the chat, so feel free to check them out there. Cool.
We got one other person. Actually, it's just me now.
Just Lena. Thanks to Lena, who's monitoring the chat.
I know your every move.
So if you have any questions, feel free to post them there.
Can people online hear me when I talk, or is it just?
Probably if you're loud enough, I guess. It's just this microphone right here, so.
I was trying to set up a library on my SSD. She was like, it didn't like the way my disk was formatted.
If it's in exFAT, it doesn't like it.
So I went through the whole process. I reformatted my disk.
Oh, man. Yeah. Can't import. This must be an older version. Yeah, it doesn't like the exFAT just because of the way it blocks data, so it could potentially like spile in a weird spot that could corrupt your database.
Yeah.
I've never seen it happen. A lot of people still use it and it's been fine, but it could, I guess, potentially happen. Yeah, so it's best to be in, Mac specific, your Windows specific, depending on what you're working on, but then of course you lose that flexibility. So good to have like a working editing drive. That's the one you always edit off of, and you can have other drives for like stuff and stuff, storage.
Yeah.
So that way you have one that's just real fast, formatted properly, and just edit off of that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I'm just going to import some media, and then we can start learning about color in DaVinci Resolve. Let's do it this way. Fun if you're ever importing media and you already have it in folders. If you drag the folders to this left sidebar, it will keep the folders intact versus it'll just mush everything together if you drag it to the middle down here. So there's some offline media. Where could that be? Might not be on this drive.
You import a folder into the project. I was trying to do that.
Something wrong with those drives, with those files. We'll just get rid of that. Yeah, so the easiest way is to come in here and you use the media storage. And then you can find it. So this is kind of like your Finder window or your, Windows folder browser. You can just come down here and find your actual folder. And then if you drag the whole folder anywhere, but to the left, we'll keep it organized. To the right, we'll just import everything in the folder and just drop it in. So right now we're in the media workspace. Yep. So we are going to jump over to the color workspace for this workshop. So that's this guy down here with a little color palette. That opens up here. And we'll start with an overview of, here, let me give you this actually. Yep. Overview of the workspace and the layout here. So in the top right, you have what's called our nodes window. So we actually have clips. Let's actually drop some in here just to get something real quick. So I can actually show you what that would look like. And there we go. So you'll see you have nodes up here. This is how you organize effects and layers on your project and what you actually apply and what you do. So you use a whole bunch of nodes, or as many as you want. I like to keep effects relatively separate throughout the stages just so I can isolate what's working, what's not working, and keep everything organized. So you can make new nodes by hitting Option S to make one after the current node, or Shift S to make one before. You can see I'm going backwards. I don't need that many right now. Let's just start with 3. So you have your nodes. These can be turned on and off by clicking on the number, or if you have one selected, you can do Command D on the keyboard, turn it off and on. Option D will turn all of them off and on, and Shift D will turn off all processing on the image from Fusion or color. So you can see that up here, bypass color. So that's your nodes window. Great way to stay organized. And I will say that the way this processes, it does process it in order. So if you do something in this, the second node, in this first node, if you use it on the first node, the second node does only act on the first node. This is your original signal. That does not go, as you can see, into the second node. So if I do something like take out all the color on this first node, I can't go to the second node and add that back in. That data has been thrown out in the first node. So make sure if you're doing things like that, it's especially important with LUTs, because LUTs, if you're working in log, will throw out extra data that the camera captures. And so you want to do that later on so that you can adjust your image before the LUT, and then the LUT can just throw out the extra unneeded data to kind of normalize your image. We'll get into that a little bit later as well.
Back up one step. Did you have to drag a media into a timeline to start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the color page will only work on a timeline. Sometimes you can do previews on clips, but yeah, so to have it here, it had to be in a timeline.
I think maybe that's one difference between Premiere. Like if I want to do color correction to something that applies everywhere I use it in the project, do I have to first put it into a timeline and then use the timeline everywhere I want to reference that?
That is a good question. In theory, yes, it needs to be on the timeline level. I feel like once I accidentally did it on the clip level, and I also don't remember how I did it. But what I would do if you wanted something to like be on that whole clip, you're going to be cutting up little pieces of the same clip, is do like a nested clip. So it's a nested sequence, and you can color grade it in that sequence, and then you edit that sequence of the color graded clip like it was your original clip. They also make it really easy to apply grades across clips in here, and we'll get into that in a minute as well. Cool. In the middle, we have our viewer. So this works like all the other viewers. You have play, reverse, stop. This will be go to next clip. And you can just see your image, see what you're working on. All the same shortcuts work. You have J to play forward, K to pause, L to play backwards. Hit them again, and it's going to go double speed. And then, of course, play to play or stop. Spacebar to play or stop. Can work there in the middle. In the left, we have what's called a stills gallery. So this is a way for you to create reference images and also save grades to easily apply over to other clips. So the way you do that is you right-click on the image here in the viewer and hit Grab Still. And you can see it created a little still from that thumbnail. And now if we go to my second clip, we didn't really do anything on this, so it's not going to do much, but we can drag it and you can see it replicates those nodes. If there were effects on those nodes, that would also be replicated onto the next clip. The other nice thing is you can, let's just actually do something quick so it will show. And still, so we have this one that's saving that higher effect. You can also just hover over the thumbnail here to see what that effect would look like on your current clip. So, and if you drag, it actually plays through the clip. Obviously, that's not what we would want, but just a great way to get a preview here. And that is the gallery. So it's good for copying and also comparing. So let's say I have this shot and I want to compare it to the previous shot. I take the still right here, and now I just hit image wipe, and you can see we can drag and drag, kind of drag the wipe along the divider. We can actually change the direction, and that way you can compare some of the tones in there and just see what's matching if you really need to match. Which brings me into one other point, color correction versus color grading. So correction is when you make your image look accurate and get it balanced and level, and then make clips match. So generally, if they're the same scene, you want the exposure and color to match. So that's what this is really useful for. And so that's your color correction. And then color grading is after you corrected everything, after you've balanced everything, you would go back and apply. Sorry, we're having a ringing bell right now. Okay. Okay, so it's gone. Where was I? Color grading is when you would actually go in and apply like a look and a style to it, something that's, you know, maybe not as concerned about accuracy and matching, but more is giving it a look and a feel. So that's kind of color correction versus color grading. Next, we're going to jump down into our correction tools. If you're on a smaller screen, maybe a laptop, it might actually mix these two windows here together, and then you'll have all these options here squished together as well. So basically underneath each of these, you have the different tools and buttons to get to each tool. So primarily what you're going to be using, what we'll get into today, are your primary color wheels, working exposure sliders, and hue adjustments. So we have that. Next to that, we have curves. You can also click through to things like the little color warper, qualifiers, power windows, more for secondary grades. We won't get into those as much today, but that's where all those live. You also have your tracker window with a camera stabilizer. Works really well, really quick, and great for tracking objects and stabilizing little handheld footage. Of course, if it's really, really shaky, you're still gonna, you know, only so much you can do, but it will, if you're just a little bit of shake, it'll really smooth it out well.
Why is that in color?
Because it's in color in DaVinci because it's built off of their tracker, which was built to track objects for color. Like if you want to change, you know, like do a power window over someone's face to maybe brighten just this one little section. And then you could track their face. And so the stabilizer works the same way, has the same technology to kind of track everything. So I think that was the natural spot to kind of add that coding in. That's my guess. I don't know why they actually did it there, but you can also find it on pages as well in the inspector. And then to the right, we have scopes. We're going to spend a little bit more time on these. These really help you understand an image, what's looking accurate, what's not, and are really useful, especially today when we have so many different screens, you know, whether it's TV screen, a computer monitor, phone screen, iPad, you know, tablet, and even within those, you know, different TVs show things differently, different computers show things differently, different phones. And so what this does is help you find a little bit of a middle ground. It's got your legal zones that if you're outside of that, it's going to look bad. So it might look good on this Mac screen that I'm working on right now, but would look terrible on a TV. So this helps you kind of define where it's like, you know, every screen looks a little different. So especially for color, it might be balanced a little different unless you're taking the time, which I do recommend, to calibrate all your screens. They could be, you know, looking fine here, but it's actually really red. And looked at the scopes, you might have seen that. So we're going to get into the scopes. The first one here is waveform. And if you don't see this, sometimes it defaults open to the keyframe window. Just make sure you click here on the scopes. The first one is waveform. So this is actually, let's turn this off. Reads left to right, up with left to right on the photos, on the actual, you know, image here. So whatever's, you can actually see I have my qualifier turned on right now. So it selects things over here, and you can see it highlights them with the little circle on the graph. So helps you kind of realize what's what, where everything sits. So basically left to right, you can actually see as I scroll across the circle moving. And then the bottom is your darkest colors, darkest shades, and top is your brightest. So again, if you have something really, bright at the top, it's going to be at the top, but if it's really bright at the bottom, it's still going to show up at the top. So just, something to be aware of. It reads left to right, correlates with the image, but obviously up and down does not, because that's representing brightness rather than horizontal location. So on the waveform here, you can see we're getting kind of close. We're probably a little bright on this. We could drop a little, but we won't want to go too much. Down below this guideline here is where you're going to start to see clipping. So everything below that will just be pure black. Up here on the other side, anything above 100, really about 97 is going to be pure white. And so you want to keep anything that needs that detail, shadows, maybe a little other color, kind of in the middle here, or, below that 97, above that 6. The only thing that should ever really be up at the very top, 97 to 100, are direct light sources, things like the sun, light bulbs. Maybe you have a really bright reflection, think something that's really shimmering. Nothing else should be that bright on the graph. So you want to usually keep it a little lower. In this instance, we want to be more down here. But then we kind of start to crush the blacks a little bit. You can see it kind of losing a little detail in the trees. So it's always kind of a balancing act, and we'll get into kind of how that works later. But just to get the idea of, brightness right in here, usually you're going to see human skin tone somewhere between 40 and 70. And then everything's kind of contextual as well. So generally you want a well spread out graph like this, especially on like a day like this where you have some shade and you have the sun and the bright sky. But if you were, let's say, in like a dark building, you would probably expect to see this graph further down. And if you tried to stretch it out, it might look a little funky. So just, look for the general rules, but also take everything, the context into account. Next, we have the RGB parade. So this is the exact same thing, works left to right, left to right, but it's 3 little graphs showing the red, green, and blue channels. And so when these are pretty balanced, you generally have a pretty good white balance. Again, this is context-based. So we have a lot of this dirt and greenery in here. So the red and green are a little higher than the blue. You could also potentially say, well, there is a blue, so the blue should be a little brighter. So in this case, I probably would cool this off a little bit, not a ton. But yeah, you have to take context. So generally you want these to be relatively balanced. That's a good white balance. If they're perfectly balanced though, if everything completely matched, it would be in grayscale. So that's not necessarily the goal, but just to get a good balance between the channels, to remove any tints. But again, it's all contextual. If you're at the ocean, blue is going to be a lot bigger than the red and green typically. If you're at a park, big green fields, the green is going to be a lot higher. And if you were to balance that out, you would start turning your grass blue. So, everything with a grain of salt, context here and there. But in general, getting a good idea with these and, just reading what you're doing. Because again, like I said, some screens might be balanced poorly. So this may look really balanced, but it doesn't right now. But say it did on your screen, but you could look down here and see that the red is way too strong. So that's your RGB parade. The next scope I want to go into is the vector scope. And this one shows hue and saturation. So you have your hues that actually match with the color wheels over here. And you have red, blue, and green. And then you have their secondaries, their complementaries, magenta, cyan, and yellow. So this kind of gives you a good idea for how the distribution of your hues is throughout and where your picture is really sitting. So this one's probably a little off, a little bit too yellow. But what I really like about this is, not only do you get the idea of hue, you also get saturation. So the further out something goes in a direction, the more saturated that color is. This doesn't have a solid legal, if you get to the edge, you're too saturated. Really you just have to look for when you start losing detail in the colors, you're losing that. You're starting to clip, you're getting too saturated. Generally, depending on the settings, I find right in here is pretty good. If you go too much further, you're starting to oversaturate. But again, like this one, you can change a lot. Like right now, mine is 2 times zoom. So if I turn it back to normal, way lower, we could saturate a little more. But again, it's all just a reference. This one doesn't have a hard and soft or hard and, you know, strong rule on you have to hit the edge. So
What's that white line?
So that white line, that is something that's really important here. And if you don't see it, you have to come down here and hit show skin tone indicator. So that is where all human skin tone, regardless of light or dark, should fall somewhere near that line. Not always directly on it, but somewhere close. So you can see when I'm here, yeah, that's pretty good. I usually try and keep it at least, you know, like this circle's big enough that it should be somewhat on the line. You know, maybe within the middle third of the circle. If you're on the edge, then you're probably getting too red or too yellow. But this is just a really great tool to make sure skin tones are looking accurate. Because people are going to notice that more than anything else. You know, if the sky's a little less blue than it should have been, nobody's going to notice. But if the skin is more blue than it should be, that's not usually a good sign. So typically, you know, you're looking up here on this kind of reddish orange line is where skin tone should be. Now, if you want to do something like, oh, you want zombies, sure, add a little green. Somebody's sick and dead, you can add a little blue. Typically, we don't add either of those shades because they're just not natural to the human skin complexion. So if you do add blue, it's going to be representing somebody's dead. If you add green, they're sick, you know, stuff like that. So typically, unless you're going for that specific effect, we don't add a lot of blue or green to skin tone, usually more along the red to yellow, bringing it in and out on that orange line. So this is really important just because, again, skin tone is what people are going to notice. If the skin tone is off, that's way more noticeable than if this dirt is a little off. So yeah, skin tone indicator, tool I really like. And the last graph we'll look at here is the histogram. So this one just reads left to right. You can also turn it on. I prefer to do that. So it also has your Y channel, which is your luma or brightness channel. Then your red, green, and blue. And this literally just plots, we have how many pixels you have at which brightness measurement. So we have a whole lot of pixels at, you know, this 90% bright, a whole bunch at that 62, 63 area. And then we have a whole bunch of red that is clipping. So our red is clipping off the end there. Usually you're just looking at if it's butting up on the end. Generally, how much there is in a different spot doesn't matter as much because literally it's just graphing it. So if you have a giant bright, you know, white billboard in there, you're going to see a whole bunch of pixels up here. But if you're out at night, you're going to see a whole bunch of pixels down lower. So this just kind of gives you a distribution of like, oh, we have a lot of bright pixels, we have a lot of dark pixels. This one we are tending towards bright, but we are outside in the sunlight, so that kind of makes sense. So that's histograms. I don't find it as useful. It's good for just a general quick, oh, this is kind of what this image is looking like, but it doesn't give you as much detail with location and everything as the other graphs do. Cool. Any questions there?
The problem with the red channel on this one, you would also see that in that other, what was it, like the waveform?
Probably not. In the vector scope?
No,
Over here?
yeah.
No, because so it's. All right, let's just see here. Let's see. Sorry, in the parade. Yeah, that's what I'm going to bring up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can see that I did. You wouldn't always see it in both. It's this image, yes, because I did boost the red channel to. I thought I boosted it. No, it's not doing anything. I thought I swore I changed something. Maybe I didn't. Maybe that one's just off. But yeah. Yeah, so now if we go back to that histogram, it's probably not all the way squished onto that side. Yep, pulled it back.
So you just turned the overall brightness down. You didn't
On that one, yeah. Yeah. I would probably balance this a little bit, cool it off a little bit, but not a ton. Yeah, so those are our scopes. Does anyone have any questions on those? Doing questions online, Lena?
I got one watching. And that's it.
Nice. All right. Yeah, thank you. If anyone has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Cool.
So I guess, how much do you typically rely on the scopes when you're editing? I mean, do you mainly just like do it by eye and then like do a little bit of sanity check?
Depends on who it is. I rely more on them because I'm colorblind, so I rely more heavily on them. But some people, yeah, really just do it by eye and then check them. Always check them for sure. I've been, as I do it more, I am more comfortable like just doing it by eye and then checking. Sometimes even I'll do it, I'll balance and correct just using the scopes, and then I'll go back and do another pass just using what feels right. And then, kind of make sure it's still staying within the legal areas on the scopes.
Do you ever like have a process where you're like, well, this looks good, but the scopes are showing me that it's not, and then you go do like some adjustment to your monitor so that the colors are like...
Well, typically I'm going to try and make sure my screen is calibrated. So they make little calibrators, you kind of rest them on the screen. It'll show a whole bunch of shades and brightnesses, and then it'll kind of measure, like, this is what it should have showed, that it did show, so let's adjust so that it shows it next time. You should really do that like at least once a week. But yeah, typically if it's really off on the histograms, it's also off on the screen. So, and a lot of times too, even like sometimes we just get used to what we're working with. We get used to the adjustments we're making and it looks fine. And then all of a sudden like the scopes look wonky and I'll like pull it back a little bit and be like, oh yeah, that did look weird. It looks better now. So sometimes they are just a good like, oh, I'm too used to this and it's looking funky, but not what I intended. So that does help as well. So always kind of rechecking. As with like any, we were talking about this the other day, like being able to take a break and come back to it is really, really powerful tool. We don't always have that time. Sometimes we have to turn things around in an hour, sometimes in a day, and you don't have time to do that. But in an ideal scenario, you can go take a week or two and then come back and review something, and you see it with fresh eyes, and that really, really helps for color, because it may have looked great all week because you were just so used to it, and then you get out, you come back, you see the real world, and you're like, oh, this looks nothing right, And so I find that so many times, and sometimes you could just do that to death, but being able to at least once take a good break, even if it's just like go walk around for 15 minutes, reset your eyes a little bit, get them used to something besides what you've been staring at. That helps a lot. Cool. So we'll get into some primary color corrections. Primary color corrections are just the corrections that go and affect the whole image, which is what we typically want to do as much as we can. Secondary corrections affect particular parts of the image. So maybe you wanted to change the color of a shirt, do some color replace, or darken this corner. You can do that. That stuff never looks as natural. So I mean, sometimes you can do it without anyone noticing, but it's secondary corrections don't look as natural as primary corrections, which is why we do those. I'm always going to do those first. You always want to get your whole image balanced before you make any minute corrections. But yeah, also just the naturalness of it. Our eyes adjust to what we see as a whole. My eye doesn't do like a weird half pupil on one side to adjust. It just adjusts, and so that's how we see things. We see things as a whole. This is also how film, which we're really used to, does things. When you want to change the color and do adjustments on film, you do what's called color timing, and you soak the whole piece of film, the whole strip, in a chemical bath, and you do it for a certain amount of time to get the certain effect that you want. And obviously, since you have to submerge the whole film, it affects the whole image. So that's how you get a more filmic look also, is to affect the whole image and don't do as many secondary corrections. So we're primarily going to do the primary corrections today. And so the primary tools I use for those are, this is way too many primaries, the primary color wheels. As you can see are down here, we have offset, gain, gamma, and lift. They call them color wheels. They also have sliders underneath, which are your brightness and exposure sliders. We're going to start here with offset. A lot of times, if an image is misexposed, this one's pretty close, you won't use offset if it's pretty close. But if it's really like, if this is where this image started, you would want to use an offset to pull it down. Hopefully it didn't start that way because you would have lost a lot of data. And pull it down. This affects the whole image pretty uniformly. So you can see we're just moving our exposure up and down. That's the slider. So the sliders affect brightness, the wheels affect color. So yeah, and this one I am going to just pull down a little bit because I want to affect the whole image. And this is kind of the workflow I recommend, is to adjust all your brightness first, then go back and do your colors. And there's an order to which you do the brightness as well. So again, if the image is really off, then you might do an offset. If it's not, if it's pretty close, which this one is pretty close, like you could maybe do a little bit. This is one on the line where I might not even do offset. I might skip it. So let's just do that for now. And the very first thing you'll want to do when you don't need offset, and that I try to do before I use offset, is lift. So lift focuses on the shadow. As you can see, it still affects the whole image. It's pulling all the way up through the top, but it's pulling more on the bottom, on the shadows. So I use that just to kind of get my, darkest parts turned in there. And probably go right in there. And so you set your shadows first, and you can see, again, it's pulling through everything. And that's why we do it first, because it's going to set the base. Then we're going to set the top with our gain. So we're going to come up here and just see where we want our gain to land. It's nice to pull things down where they should be, but sometimes if an image is a little bright to start with, when you pull it down too much, you start to lose contrast a little bit. So we're going to keep this one a little high since it was shot a little high. Yeah.
So these are the same concepts in like Premiere as shadows, highlights, and midtones, but they just use different terms.
Yes and no. That's what Premiere's trying to do. Premiere didn't really code the tools to work properly, so they don't really work like they should. That's why I never recommend color grading in Premiere. I've seen good results from it, but it's just not, their tools don't work like every other color program's tools do.
I've just never seen these terms.
Yeah.
But I have seen shadows, highlights, and midtones.
And you'll see that here on the log wheels, which is a more specific tool for working with log footage. In my experience, Premieres do not work like primary wheels or log wheels. They just picked a name and threw it on there and have some wheels that do some stuff. But it does not work like any other program's wheels. So that's why I don't recommend it. I know, again, people get great results out of there all the time, but it's just not, it doesn't work like a traditional color grading or like, a powerful color grader even. It's just kind of there. So, yeah, and you'll notice these are pretty, having the lift, gamma, gain, and then your shadow, midtone, highlights for log wheels are pretty universal through most full-on color grading programs, DaVinci, Assimilate, Baselight, that kind of thing. So that's the nice thing. Every once in a while, somebody might shift the gamma to something else, but generally they're called the same. So yeah, it is similar to the ones in Adobe, but they don't work the same. But similar concept, yes. So yeah, you have your slider, set your lift first, set your top, and then you're going to adjust gamma, which is your midtones. And gamma really works like a big curve. You're just kind of adjusting how it curves one way or the other. There we go, caught up. And that's really what gamma does. It's not just raising the midtones up or down or anything. It's actually adjusting this curve and how things flow into the shadows and highlights. So that's what gamma does. You usually use that to kind of just, obviously your midtones, kind of get, if I have people in there, get them looking around the zone I want them to be. And then what you'll notice is because these all pull on each other, the gain, focuses on the top, but still pulls at the bottom. Sometimes after you set one, you have to go back and adjust another, and you have to maybe pull that back up, and I want to lower that. You kind of have to do this little juggling act, a little bouncing act to kind of go back and forth. But it'll eventually lock you in. So, and it is a little more tedious than just like having a specific thing that only affects the middles, but it keeps it much more natural looking. So if you do the log wheels, they overlap a little bit, but not as much. You can see it's just affecting the midtones, but you can see how I can very easily, very quickly start to invert our colors. So those are great for certain things. But again, these are just your most natural, quick. Once you get used to them, you can just really roll through stuff and get everything balanced and corrected pretty quick. Cool. So those are the sliders. After I set my exposure with the sliders, so typically I'll do this in one node. So let's just go ahead and pull this back there. Then I'll create a second node where I do my color adjustments. Again, I just like to keep things separate, keep them organized. And then that way too, you can turn off individual nodes so I can kind of see, okay, did the color or the brightness mess, if I liked it and then all of a sudden it didn't look good, I can kind of try to identify where I lost it. We'll keep that on. We'll do color. So we'll switch over to our RGB parade. Let's just say we want to balance this. We'll just kind of pull that in. You can see if it's balanced, it's too blue. So that's where you kind of don't want that perfect balance. But we do want to make this, just restart, a little bit bluer. Typically, I'm only using offset or gain for color. Probably gain the most. Because you can see like our bottom is pretty well locked in. So what you do want is, if you have something that's actually pure black and something that's pure white in your image, you do want the very top of each graph and the very bottom to be lined up. because otherwise, like right now, you can see the blue's a little lower. So we probably have, instead of black at our darkest, we probably have more of a dark orange. And of course, we want, more of a black if that's what you're doing. I don't know that we have a pure black in here, so it may not be as big of a deal on this one. I guess maybe those, but that's not showable a lot. But that's a great way to get color contrast, is to make sure that the blacks are black, the whites are white, because it just creates a good reference point for everything else. So, in this case, try and balance the bottom. And then we could, try and balance the top, but you're going to see that's kind of, it kind of saturates our sky a little better, actually. And then the middle, if you needed it to kind of do skin tone. But more often than not, if something was exposed properly and white balance properly, I get away with just a little gain correction.
Why is that?
Because you see the color shifts more in the brighter sections than in the darker. They can happen. Like, if the white balance was off, you're going to see an image that's like this. You can see, like, everything's off. That's when you might use the offset. But in this case, you can see it was off. It was maybe just slightly, not necessarily off, just preference to have it slightly warm. And so, but you can see the shadows are pretty darn close. They're a lot closer than the highlights. So that tells me that an offset would, I could do the offset to balance the highlights, but now we really threw off the shadows. So that's why I wouldn't use that unless I only do that if the whole thing is really off all the way through, which usually means there was a pretty bad white balance miss. Yeah, that's kind of your basic color corrections. There are some other tools. I don't like them as much. You don't get as much control, but they are really nice for like a quick, you just need to really quickly correct something, and that's your temperature tools here in your tint. So temperature is basically your blue versus red. So you'll see when we do it, it's really, green shifts a little in there, but primarily we're adjusting our red and blue channels. And then tint is your magenta, red and blue, versus green. So just kind of a quick way, but you just obviously don't get as much control as having the little nuances of all the little hues in here. You have to use, this all. You can get a pretty darn good balance here, and this is really great when you need a quick thing. Sometimes I have really difficult things that are also easier to do with this, but in general, you just don't get as much control. So, but that is a great way to work as well. Another one for brightness and exposure, kind of same thing. Can work really quick. Sometimes it works. This one I don't find it works as often, but it is quick. Is your contrast and pivot, and this is more for brightness. So you can boost your contrast here. And the pivot is actually the central point around where it's contrasting. So if you're spreading out your graph, the top goes brighter, the bottom goes down. Where's the point where it stops, going up or down? So you kind of set the pivot point for where it goes up. So you can make it more contrasty in a brighter way or more contrasty in a dark way by adjusting that pivot.
So with this, you can accomplish this all with the individual wheels.
Yeah, and usually not always as quick. I mean, if you practice them, yeah, as quick, but usually with a little bit more accuracy and can get a little bit more into it, but not always necessary. Just depends on the project. And sometimes I really don't find contrast to work in some images. So, and sometimes it works better than the other tool. So it's kind of just knowing what's there and being able to try different things. Every image is a little different. Cool. Any questions on that?
Are you, we did get a question. It says, great stream. Are you only streaming on YouTube? Also on Facebook.
We're also on Facebook. Okay, for anyone, for those asking, we are on Facebook and YouTube live streaming. Thanks, Lena.
We'll just also just put our stuff in the chat.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Cool. So next thing we're going to get into real quick here is normalizing and adjusting log footage. So for those of you who don't know, log footage is basically something you shoot in camera that takes out the contrast in camera because, let me actually see, I think I can pull this up. Effects generators. 10 step. There we go.
Are you going to talk about using the curve at all?
I can.
Is it something you use?
I don't use the curve very much. I know a lot of people who only use the curve and like it quite a bit. It's just also really easy to get too precise and invert things and become a secondary correction. So you can do primary corrections and secondary with the curve. And we'll actually talk about the curve in the normalizing section a little bit. But yeah, it's just really easy to kind of overdo it with the curve is why I don't use it as much. But you can also do some things that are really hard to do in the other tools that look really great with the curve as well. So, yeah, so normalizing log footage. So basically, you can see we have our steps of dynamic range from light to dark. And we can, of course, our eyes can see a lot more than this. We could see, 20 shades between this or 30, and we could see even brighter and even darker. But cameras and screens can't. They're getting pretty darn good. They, can see, still can't capture the full range of what we actually see in the world, but they can capture a lot more than they used to be able to. I think it's up to 15 stops now. This is about 10 right here, which is kind of typical, kind of your film dynamic range usually sits 10 to 12. But basically, when you're shooting in camera, let's just say you're shooting this section, anything brighter than this just gets clipped into pure white, and anything darker than this gets clipped into pure black. But what basically that looks like is, let's just say the cameras are better than this now, but let's just say they only go from here to here. So anything darker than this is just black. You don't get those shades of gray. Anything brighter than this is just white. So what they do with log is they pull out the contrast to pull all these things that are at the edges getting clipped into the middle, prevent them from getting clipped, and then you can expand that contrast later, kind of creating a deeper image, more dynamic range, more lights and darks in it than you would get if you did the initial regular shooting where it would clip it all. So basically it creates more work in post. You have to normalize and adjust your footage in post, but it gives you a much more depthy image in color and contrast. So when you are shooting with log, let's go ahead and pull some log footage in. I'm just going to do this. The first thing you have to do is normalize it so that it looks normal. The simplest way to do this is with a LUT. Most camera manufacturers will put out a LUT, and then DaVinci has a ton of these built in. And like I said, you throw out all the extra data. So we have a lot of extra data in here that's just compressed, very desaturated, very neutral right now. We can expand that to be more contrasty and saturated. But we want to still be able to work with the extra data we had and be able to edit that. So the way you do that is create 3 nodes, or however many you want. I usually do 3, and put my LUT on the 3rd. So this has a built-in Sony S-Log3. And you'll see it gets all the contrast, a little bit of saturation. Sony's LUT doesn't add as much saturation, so if you're doing Sony, I find I still need to go in and boost the saturation a little more to get it normal looking. But now we have a normalized image. We have all the extra data that we can manipulate down here to create a better image here. And then, of course, anything beyond this, if I create another node, is going to be lacking that data. So we're going to not do our adjustments behind but in front. So we'll come back up to our first node. And this is where you can use the log wheels just to kind of set your shadows and highlights. You could also use these. I kind of do both. So we'll actually go back to the waveform. And here in the log wheels, we can go up, and you can see it's just pulling the top. So I'm just kind of adjusting that contrast that they had already built in there. And now we can kind of adjust the midtones. Kind of adjust that. And then I come and do my colors over here. Probably boost my saturation a little bit to get this a little bit more normalized. You can really see it on the trash can there. And make all your adjustments. Again, this is just you're doing it before so that you still have all the extra data that the camera caught, but you don't need all of that for your final image. But that just helps you have more data to work with coming forward. The other way, there are a few other ways to normalize. We won't get into one of them. Color management is a whole other ballgame where you can use ACEs and DaVinci Resolve color managers and all that. But today we'll also look at curves. So what a LUT is basically a really complex saturation curve to expand that image back into a contrasty look. I've never gotten super good at this. I've been able to do it a few times, but generally the LUT looks better than what I can do. But you basically just make a whole bunch of points and you just kind of adjust the curve all throughout. I'm not really doing a good job right now, but that's where that is. Every time you click, you just create a new spot. If you right click, you can delete one, right click on it. So typically you would start, maybe build your initial S, which looks a little funkier here than most S curves because this is more rectangular than the traditional S curve, which is a square, so it gets spread out more. So don't try and make your regular S. It just won't work. So you do that, kind of adjust the different sections. There we go. Nope. I'll get rid of that one first. Yeah, but anyways, you would go in and probably, 10 or 20, 30 little points on there to really finesse a real nice one. People who can do that can do it, can look way nicer than a LUT just right off the bat, but it's also a lot of practice and training. I prefer just to do a LUT and then really finesse it with these other tools. So that's a great way to normalize. Any questions on that? Yeah. So if you wanted to see something different, you could turn off a node and it should. Well, we didn't do much on this one. There we go. So it should adjust it. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to show whatever's coming out to this output here.
Do you ever do two nodes at a time, next to each other in the flow?
Yeah, people do, they'll call them parallel nodes. There's a whole bunch of ways you can do it, a whole bunch of different things you can do. There are reasons, it's, so now we have two that feed into this little mixer back. So you might do that if you were gonna work I'm gonna do noise reduction on just the red channel. You could isolate the red channel and do that if for some reason that one was more noisy, or just the blue channel, just the green channel. I'll see people do that a lot for that. Some people do it, they just like to have everything, they might do the brightness and color parallel, and that way they're both working off of the original image and then sending it into the LUT, which is probably a better way than the way I do it, where I do brightness, color, LUT. If you actually do brightness and color next to each other, they both get a feed off of the original image. There's pros and cons to both of them. A lot of it's preference, and then some images do better with different workflows. And you can do a whole bunch. It doesn't have to just be two. You could do 3 or 4, or I'm sure you could do a whole lot more. But the most I've ever done was 4 or 5. So, yeah, they're called parallel nodes. The regular ones are called serial nodes. So if you ever don't use a shortcut in coming, you can do add serial before, parallel, layer outside. So if you were doing a mask, you can have it then do the reverse mask on the next node. So you could adjust the stuff outside of the mask, that kind of thing.
What's an example of a con to doing parallel nodes? Because it sounds like there's more information.
Yeah, probably speed. To me, it would just make sense to get my brightness in first and then adjust the colors off of what's there. But some people might just want to, because you're not losing all the information when you go to the next. You are when you go to the LUT. I'm sure there's some reason that it's better, but for me, in most projects, it's about the same. I'm sure there's somebody out there who has a whole reason why I'm wrong, but.
Someone has a question.
Yeah.
With the nodes and stuff, is it similar to Blender with the nodes where you connect them and they overlap?
And they overlap. They don't overlap so much here. They're very linear. So, this node has an input, and then you do your effect, and it has an output, and that's what's here. So they're very similar to Blender. They don't quite interact backwards as much. More of just a forward only. Does that answer your question?
When do you choose to shoot in log?
I do 90% of the time just to have the extra stuff to work with. I don't for really, really quick turnaround stuff. If I'm not gonna have time to do much color grading, then I just won't. But I don't know, it's one, you have more data so you can make it look a little nicer. Two, it's also a good safety. So you're less likely to clip your whites and blacks. So if you were a little over or under, or you're shooting somewhere that's really contrasty, maybe you're outside in the shade, but the sun's over here. It just helps protect more of the things and it gives you more data. So if you really want to just get the fullest quality, you would do log. But sometimes just like it's not going to make a difference. Like in somewhere like this, it's not going to make as much difference because we don't have as much of a variety of light to dark. So. Yeah. Well, let me know if we get anything else on the notes, Lena. Last thing is moving timelines to Resolve. A lot of people, I actually do this. I do edit in Resolve, but I also edit in Lightworks, Final Cut, Media Composer, and then I'll bring it over to Resolve to color. Because again, even in Premiere, if I edit in Premiere, I'm going to bring it to Resolve to color because the color tools are just that much better. They make it really easy because this is what DaVinci was built for. DaVinci was the first digital color grading platform, and then they, in the last 10 years, added on all this other stuff. But their big thing was color, so they had to be able to get the timelines from every other editor. So it's really good at doing that. It's depending on which program you're coming from, might not get all the information. So I don't tend to do a whole lot of the effects in the other program. I just edit. I just lay out my edit and then I move it to DaVinci for all finishing. Because sometimes like resizing, rotating, volume doesn't get crossed over. So it just depends on your workflow, but yeah, typically I'm just going to edit and then come into Resolve and do all my color. If it's a really quick turnaround, I might do the mixing in Fairlight, which is a great newer piece of DaVinci. Otherwise, if I have more time, I'll move it over to Pro Tools. Again, just finding the best tool for the job. You could do it in-house on most of these other programs. So again, if it's a quick turnaround, I'm just going to do that. If I have more time, it's going to be a little nicer in another program. So moving over is pretty easy. If you are in Adobe or Final Cut, you can export an XML or an FCP XML in Final Cut of your timeline, and then you would come in to DaVinci. Typically, I will import all my footage in the same layout that I had in the other program ahead of time. Just for me, it makes it easier, but you don't have to do that. You just go right-click Timelines, Import, AAF, EDL, XML. So I can't remember if Adobe can do an AAF as well. A lot of programs can do EDLs. If you're coming from Avid, it's going to be an AAF rather than an XML. But Final Cut and Adobe tend to use the XML. And then you're going to go, oh, did I miss it? Oh, there, I clicked on the wrong thing. Well, you're going to go find the file, import it. I don't think I actually have one here. If you're going to import it, it's going to ask, do you want to import the media? If I haven't already imported it, I'll keep that checked. If not, I'll uncheck it because otherwise it duplicates. And it's going to import everything. It's going to open up the timeline. You can go in here and just check that it conformed properly. I very rarely have it not conform properly, which just means that maybe the cuts didn't line up. Maybe this audio channel got moved over here. Very rarely has that happened, but you should always check. Just make sure everything's still lined up where you had it. But generally, it's pretty good at getting all that right. And then you just treat it like normal. You can go in and color grade.
How does like multicam stuff work between Premiere and DaVinci?
That is a trickier part. Whenever you're moving multicam or nested sequences, you have to flatten them first. So you have to have chosen your camera beforehand. You can't move over the multicam and like switch between them in DaVinci. Yeah. Cool. And that's kind of all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
There were two tools in DaVinci that looked appealing. One was like Color Boost.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was like match clip to another clip automatically.
Yeah, color boost is kind of a derivative of saturation. Depending on the image, it can look nice. It almost kind of reminds me of Vibrance in Photoshop if you've used that. But it can also look really hokey really quick if you overdo it. It's one of those like use it very subtly. Color match, I haven't used it. I haven't tried it in the last version or two, but typically I don't have good luck with it. Matching shots between it generally doesn't work. But I would imagine with all the AI updates, it's gotten a lot better. Yeah.
We don't have any questions online, but did get a comment from Two Cat Naps. Says, thank you. I'm not from Denver, but I will rewatch this live if I can. I just finished a project for my video editing class and wanted to try Resolve instead of Premiere, but have no time. Kind of just wanted to point them in the direction of DCM Online Academy.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for checking us out. We will have more of these all month. We're doing these free workshops that'll be live streamed as well. I don't know if we have any more on DaVinci specifically. We do have Adobe, some other screenwriting and camera classes as well. But yeah, we do have our DCM Online Academy where we have some tips and quick tips on getting started with DaVinci Resolve. And yeah, just a lot more of these coming up this month online. So definitely go to our landing page for that, denvercommunitymedia.org/get-involved. Little hyphen between the get and involved. And yeah, it should be in the chat. And I'd love to see you all at more of these.
Another question.
Yes.
So if you want to make different changes to different like parts of the clip, like over time, you have to split the clip up.
You can keyframe it in here. Yeah, so you could keyframe the corrector. I don't do a whole lot of that typically. Yeah, I just haven't run into the need to it super often. But yeah, you can actually just keyframe the effects here.
Two Cat Naps has a question.
Yeah.
They ask, sorry, can you go over your workflow again? So you would color grade first, then add effects and transitions?
I don't really have an order for that one for as far as color grading versus effects and transitions. Typically, yeah, I would probably color grade first and then do transitions. I don't use a whole lot of transitions or other effects, honestly. But if I did, yeah, I would probably. Sorry, let the doorbell stop ringing. Okay. Yeah, typically I would probably do the transition there primarily because if I load up my clip, it's going to load at the start and then I have to deal with the transition there versus just seeing the full image. So you could also disable it. Same thing with effects. You know, you can put them on before, unless you want to see how the color grade looks with the effect. I would turn it off so that you can see clearly your color grading. So yeah, typically I guess I would do them after color grading, but sometimes I put them on ahead just to see what they look like, and then I just turn them off for the color grade.
So color grading is kind of a whole different topic that you would like cover in a different workshop. Or...
Yeah, it's all the same concepts, but yeah, it's just you would get into more look creation than correction and balancing. And there's not so much a right way to do it. You just use whatever tool to get the look you like. So I kind of just, learn all the tools with color correcting and balancing, and then you can kind of apply them to your grade to just kind of create more of a look. The other thing that I would do in like a more, if we had another hour is secondary correction. So power windows, maybe they didn't light the face well enough and you just need to bring up the eyes a little bit, or maybe something in the background was the wrong color and you want to change the color, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and those are more, I don't know if that really falls, probably more of a color grading thing than a color correction, but those kind of fall almost into a weird compositing effects realm.
So you probably do more color correction on like the clip level, and then once you get all the clips corrected, you would apply color grading to like the timeline.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the ideal, that everything is balanced and matched enough that you could apply the look just across the whole timeline. Oftentimes that doesn't work. It's like different scenes in the same timeline because they might just be different enough that your grade doesn't take on all of them. But there are a lot of ways to do that, so we can look at that real quick. Last thing. So up here you have clip, and it's this little dot. You can click this dot or do the drop down to go to timeline. And here you can make nodes to apply something to the entire timeline, which is nice. And you can also group clips by selecting them, right clicking, and you can, oh no, where'd it go? Why is it not there? Did they move it? I can't find it, but you can typically, I don't know where it went. I think this one's on a few versions old, this computer. You can typically put clips and groups. I said put clips in. So you can do like, here's this scene, here's scene, and then you can apply the grade to each of them and then just adjust it for each scene so that it looks the same. Yeah, so there's a lot of options on how you just apply to certain things versus one clip versus multiple clips versus the entire timeline. So, yeah. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said, we'll be doing more of these, so check out our webpage and hope to see you at more. What? Ooh, and subscribe, Lena says. Like it, subscribe, follow, all the fun stuff.